past has been loaded heavily with the concepts of sustainable and development. If you take resource use, this is more art. But if you take any domain within the broad aspect of social sciences, we get to know that the concept of sustainable development is getting paramount importance, significance. Now, friends, I am taking this because Dr. Mahesh said that my lecture should directly relate with the development issues on the environmental dimension. Therefore, I thought that it is better to touch my own area, the agriculture development, oriented towards sustainable development. Now, if you look at the recent development in the Indian subcontinent, starting from a day over yesterday's dialogue between Russian president and the USA president, our farmers, our agriculture sector is likely to be on the crossroads for two reasons. Number one, our efficiency level is much below than the global average in agriculture sector. Number two, the US president has been pressurizing the Indian authorities to permit the genetically modified animal products as well as crop products to be marketed in India. Being students in economics and closely related subjects, you all know the consequences, what the floodgate of agricultural economy will be in India once if you permit the GM crops, which is being cheaply produced in the United States and other developed countries. We will see the consequences and how the issues are working at a global level a bit later. Now, given these two aspects, it is I thought that it is better to touch upon the sustainable development by taking the broad development of agriculture from the Indian subcontinent, where I have a bit depth of knowledge. Now, having said this, day before yesterday, I just happened to look at a bit of news which appeared in the Times of India. The total global population depending on agriculture has been steadily declining. India is not an exception to this. However, we should keep in our mind the paradox in terms of shifting from agriculture to non-agriculture, as we expect, from agriculture to industry, industry to service, and ultimately we go to a developed economy. Now, if you see the backdrop of most of the developing countries, the fall in the share of agriculture to total GDP has been very consistent and more. If you look at the countries like India, and currently we have roughly 48% of population depending on agriculture, where we get 12 to 15% of income from agriculture, which is very paradoxical. I would call it as paradoxical in the agriculture development. If you see the slides, I don't know whether it is visible to all the audience or not. The dependency, the dependent of...
Sir, it's visible.
Okay. Population in agriculture in the USA is 2%. In Japan, it is 3%. And even in China, in the year 1991, it was 60%. And during the same period, 63% in India. But very surprisingly, China brought down to 22% now, as compared to around 40% in India. This is a paradoxical issue, I would say. And this has a cascading effect on Indian agriculture as such. Not only agriculture, but also the linkages between forward and backward within other sectors like industry, manufacturing, and the service sector is also worrisome. Therefore, how it can be sustainably brought in the framework of development, that is what our interest is. If you look at the concept of our Prime Minister's remark, for us, our farmers' welfare is supreme. That is what he told in the recent past in the press. Now, having said this, let us also try to understand what is happening in the Indian countryside. We will go to the arguments a bit
Sir,
later.
full screen ಕೊಡಿ sir.
Sir?
Sir, full screen ಕೊಡಿ sir ಅದು ನಿಮ್ಮ screen.
Full screen try ಮಾಡ್ತಾ ಇದೀನಿ ಬಟ್ ಅದು ಬರ್ತಾ ಇಲ್ಲ.
Slide show sir, slide show.
Slide show. F5 ಕೊಡಿ sir ಇಲ್ಲ ಅಂದ್ರೆ.
Slide show. ತಾಮರೆ?
Sir, F5 press ಮಾಡಿ sir.
F5 ಕೊಡಿ sir ನಿಮ್ಮ.
Sorry sir.
ನಿಮ್ಮ ಸಿಸ್ಟಮ್ ಅಲ್ಲಿ F5 ಅಂತ ಆಪ್ಷನ್ ಇದೆಯಲ್ಲ ಸರ್ ಕೀಬೋರ್ಡ್ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಅದು ಕೊಡಿ ಸರ್.
F5 ನಾ?
ಹೌದು ಸರ್.
ನಿಲ್ಲಿಸು ತಾಮರೆ ಕೂಪಿடுங்க. F5, right?
Yes, sir. Functional key 5.
Okay. It's not coming.
Dear sir, better you go for slideshow on top of the screen.
Share is there.
So there is a slideshow, sir. You will find from the beginning.
Slideshow, sir.
There is a insert, draw, design.
Share is there. Amare, full
Slideshow.
Sir, new slide, it's showing, no sir? Above the screen. New slide, it's showing.
Slide show.
Slide.
Is it okay now?
Now okay, sir. Fine.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Good, very good. Now, let me just give the broad picture of our Indian farmers where we stand. This also I took from the All-India Investment Survey, 77th round, published by NSS in the year bit old data, but however it reflects the Indian situation as such. If you look at the percentage of debt among rural urban households, it comes to 22% roughly. And the source of credit, which is a clear picture on the how it is very institutional and non-institutional, etc. Around 15% of the borrowings are from institutional source, like commercial banks and things like. And if you look at the other households in row number 3, debt among other households, it comes to 21%. In rural households, in urban households, it is 22%. In other households, it is 21%. If you go to 4th row, you find a debt among rural households, the percentage shoots up to 35%. Again, the source is 10%, bit higher than urban households, amounting to 10.2% from non-banking financial institutions, and from both formal as well as informal source is 7%. 7%. And this amount to conclude that still, after almost 50-60 years of bank nationalization and also various measures we have initiated to provide the institutional source, we are still depending on non-banking financial source, financial what you call the support. If you go to other aspect like debt among cultivator households, still 40% of the households, cultivator households, are debt. There is a saying in agricultural economics, Indian farmers born in debt, lived in debt, and died in debt. And if you go to the last row, debt among non-cultivator households, it is 28%, which clearly shows a situation where the rural area is more indebted and under distress, primarily from the non-banking financial sources, including money lenders, etc. Now, why we have focused the sustainable agriculture development in India? Now, historically, if you look at the transformation, there is a complete shift from primary sector to subsistence, primitive type to subsistence, from subsistence to conventional, Afterwards, due to industrialization and technological advancement, etc., our farming became more modern. And later, of course, it ended up in commercial. And now it is completely factory made segment in the economic activity. You take any branch within agriculture, any operation, everything depends on factory made. Even to apply pesticides, we use the drones, which is capital intensive, input intensive, and therefore the farming becomes less sustainable in the long run. And therefore, friends, we started looking back to primitive subsistence conventional farming. We call it as U-turn with sustainability as the core argument. And we also know fully well that the textbook arguments, there is a strong forward and backward linkages emanating from agriculture sector to other segments, not only for food, but also for other activities. Even the industrial segment is depending on agriculture, like textiles, etc. And also, there are fatigues in agriculture. What do you mean by fatigue? On the one hand, we have huge amount of cultivable land in India, and also we produce huge amount of food grains. But there is a paradoxical issue here. The area is not producing efficiently in terms of output. And on the other hand, though we have huge amount of network of agriculture stations, agriculture research stations in the country, we still unable to improve the efficiency through land productivity. In the technological terms, academic terms, we call it as technological fatigue on the one hand and policy fatigue on the other, which is preventing the growth of agriculture sector, not necessarily capital intensive agriculture, but also the sustainable agriculture development. Therefore, it becomes important to study the dimensions of sustainable development in agriculture. And also, friends, as you all know, we were importing food grains immediately after the political independence in the 40s and 50s. And now we are having surplus food grain production. However, we lack nutritional security. We are unable to fulfill the demand for nutritional food grains and other agricultural commodities. Therefore, it attracts the policymakers to ensure the nutritional security in the Indian subcontinent. Therefore, on the one hand, we have to ensure that the food grain production is sustained, and also we should see that the large people, particularly from the rural areas, get the nutritional food items. And the fifth important point is paradoxical dimensions in agriculture in terms of income and employment that I told in the beginning itself in one sentence. On the one hand, our deceleration in the employment is very slow as compared to deceleration in the income. Both are decreasing. That is what we expect when the economic transformation is taking place from primary sector to manufacturing, from manufacturing to service sector. This is actually happening, but disproportionately happening. And we achieved many domains within agriculture. You take cereal production, you take millets, you take oil seeds, pulses, horticultural commodities, fisheries, livestock products, etc. And we could reach even number one in terms of aggregate production. But unfortunately, friends, remember, still we have challenges in the area of increasing efficiency per unit productivity. You take any segment within agriculture, our efficiency is much, much below. I have some data to show a bit later. Now, the situational assessment survey shows very clearly we have roughly 13,661 rupees per month income from rural households, of which very surprisingly, only 33% is from crop cultivation. The remaining comes from earnings through labor, like wages, etc. and other segments. It shows, though we call them as agriculturists, their income is almost 2/3 of income comes from non-agricultural activities, somehow they are managing. Therefore, our policymakers, even the planners, started focusing on how our farming can be sustainably managed in the long run to ensure both the food and nutritional security. Now, friends, some of you might have seen my earlier, would have heard from my earlier lectures. This slide is invariably present in my presentation. Where it clearly says that almost 40% of the farmland become less fertile or abandoned due to salination, waterlogging, and desertification. This is due to unscientific method of cultivation practices and unscientific practice of using the crucial resources, including water. Friends, many catchment areas, many watershed areas in the flood irrigated areas, they become saline and waterlogged, and ultimately they become desertifications. One report published by the National Center for Irrigation Management in Karnataka very clearly says that in another 10 to 15 years, the entire food baskets of India, Punjab, Haryana, they are likely to become desertification because the landscape is like basin and the water cannot be run away from that. And therefore, continuous waterlogging with intensive farm practices like application of chemical inputs, etc., in the long run, they will become less fertile, and sometimes there is a possibility to become deserts in the long run. Therefore, this is one of the important challenges Indian agriculture is facing, not only in the agriculturally prosperous areas, but also in the highly irrigation intensive areas. Now, very recently, the government of India, the cabinet approved the proposal. Some of you would have gone through the report. The government of India is poised to start a scheme to boost the agriculture sector with a huge amount of resource allocation of 24,000 rupees, 24,000 crore rupees per annum for about 6 years in 100 selected districts. Friends, as you all know, there are 3 important aspects. Number 1, to ensure the irrigation facilities. Number 2, post-harvest storage facilities, and also minimizing the post-harvest losses. And more importantly, the focus on ensuring increased farm productivity. I have been telling since beginning, the efficiency level in Indian agriculture is very less, and therefore the government of India is giving special attention how the output level, the yield level can be improved, not necessarily from crop sector, but also from other areas. And the core aspect of ensuring farmer credit is also getting attention. These 4 or 5 aspects with the special package to boost agriculture has been approved recently, and it is going to be a kind of watershed program in the Indian agriculture planning is concerned. But I don't know how they are going to implement and how we are going to channelize, because some of the states are ruled by the opposition parties, including Karnataka, Tamil Nadu, Kerala, etc. And how the resource allocation could be and how the output, the result would be, we would wait and see. But it is a very in-depth thought project, which the Niti Aayog's aspirational district program also comes in the way of implementing this innovative scheme. 2 major aspects we can see on the first line in the center. The main objective is to enhance agricultural productivity and to increase adoption of crop diversification through various means. Now, friends, having given this much brief aspects, now I have devised my presentation in 9 sections. For both the lectures, we have 2 sessions. They are followed by the brief introduction. Let me also take you to address what are the policy interventions the Indian government made over the period from political independence till date, and also how the growth aspects, growth patterns of sectors, and also within agriculture, what are the aspects attained green shoots in their growth and development, and which are the gray areas still left. We will see in that. And then interventions made within agriculture sector, starting from credit and also technological aspects, and then policy interventions, and things like we will discuss in the fourth section under the interventions in Indian agriculture. And I would take you to understand what are the paradoxical aspects, what are the nexus within the agriculture is taking place, as we could see on the technological as well as policy paradoxes that we just discussed a bit ago. And then recent interventions in agriculture development focusing on sustainable and the resultant impact on current scenario. And afterwards, we will discuss how the recent pandemic affected agriculture, because this has influenced greatly. As we all know, on the one hand, we had food shortage, and on the other, we couldn't have sufficient market facilities to market their commodities, and therefore we had to dump different agriculture commodities on the common pool. And finally, I would draw some inferences for policy suggestions. This way I have devised. Now, let us try to understand the recent developments in agriculture and rural development, where we have still around 40 to 45% of the population depending on agriculture. Now, friends, remember the Indian government, which is imposing huge tariff on food items that we are exporting to US. It amounts to 40.2%. On the one hand, we have been worrying, shouting against the US government that the demand for opening their market in India, against the opening of their market in India. But however, we in India, we are imposing almost 40.2% tariff to the farm commodities we export to USA. This is mainly because, in another slide I will show with evidence, this is mainly because most of the developed countries, including US, gives huge amount of subsidy to their farmers. But unfortunately, we in India, we don't support the farmers with a huge amount. I remember in one of the lectures, as you all know, Professor Isalaya, who was the Vice Chancellor of University of Agricultural Sciences in Bangalore, he presented a paper and where he was mentioning sarcastically, almost a cattle in the developed countries receives $5 worth of subsidy for their agriculture, whereas for the subsidy given to grow a cow. But whereas in India, even the entire subsidy allocated per unit for crop cultivation is not to that amount. That is what sarcastically was pointing out. And in the international communities, artificially suppress the price factor through heavy subsidies. And that is what the Indian planners are worried. Once if you open the cheap products from USA and other developed countries, Indian farmers will be seriously affected. And then the unfavorable weather conditions that are likely to affect the high value crops. Within agriculture, we have high value crops like pepper, coffee, tea, and horticulture commodities like fruits, etc. They are likely to affect due to climate change and unfavorable weather conditions in the Indian subcontinent. I think you all may be knowing, it is a textbook reading, that India is having favorable agroclimatic conditions all over the country to grow multiple crops, multiple agricultural commodities, multiple animal species, multiple forest products, and things like. Therefore, any change in the climate and weather conditions would affect the agricultural commodities. And then rejection of genetically modified rice from India by other countries, particularly France. And similar cases we have witnessed for gingerly, cashew nut, chilies, raw chilies, etc. from other countries. Only recently, the European Union lifted the ban on importing Indian mango to their regions. And then in India, we have hiked the fertilizer subsidy in the budget. But where does the subsidy goes? It goes to the manufacturers of fertilizers, larger multinational companies, and the farmers get the benefit the least. Disposal of dreaded endosulfan stock in Kerala. There are reports that though India banned the utilization of endosulfan pesticide as it is having hazardous impact on the environment, still we found the stocks kept in states like Kerala and they just disposed in the open, which is likely to affect the environment. And there was a proposal to directly procure the paddy from the farmers, what we call direct purchase mechanism in Tamil Nadu, and how it is going to influence the farmers. There is another twist in the recent past. During the last procurement season, the Tamil Nadu state permitted private agencies also to directly procure from the farmers, and it is likely to affect, and therefore the farmers associations are against such a proposal which was introduced last year in Tamil Nadu. This year we have to see because as you all know, we are getting enough water from Kaveri, and the Kaveri Delta is likely to produce bumper crop this year. And therefore, this year also the arrival of paddy to the market could be heavy, and we have to wait and see how it is going to be rationalized. And then the ultimate demand from the US is that we have to allow their genetically modified soya crop and also the milk products to India. I think, friends, as you all know, at present India produces more dairy products, particularly milk, in the world. India is the #1 country. However, American products are cheap due to two reasons. So, #1 is the efficiency is more there, and #2, it is highly subsidized products, and therefore it is very cheap. And if you allow them to introduce in India, the local market will be, local farmers will be affected, and their sustainability will be at stake. So therefore, it is essential that we want to see that our farmers are protected, our welfare is maintained, threadbare. Now, why the Indian farmers need to be protected from import? I think this may not be visible very fully, but there are 3 or 4 sections. I would just glance them. The first part, which shows how various commodities are highly subsidized in other countries, and how the productive efficiencies across different countries as compared to Indian situation. The third aspect is how and what extent the agriculture shares in employment and also the gross value addition is highlighted on the bottom left side. And then the financial support in the form of both subsidy as well as direct to where in various countries has been given. China, they are allotting 310 million billion US dollars, and India, we are minus to $42 billion. So this picture shows the efficiency level in Indian agriculture is very less, and sometimes it is negative, and the financial support is very less, and also the yield level of major crops like wheat, maize, rice, soybean, groundnut, grapes, mustard seed are very less in India as compared to other crops. I think to compare some states with the Indian also, I have some data we will see in the last sections. Now, having said, what is our planning targets? Indian economic planning. We have been clamoring, we have been insisting through Indian economic planning with the 4 important elements, key aspects, key objectives. Number 1, our economic growth should be sustainable. Friends, remember, the word sustainability got into our domain, our development domain, as early as our Indian economic planning. we started insisting that our economic growth should be sustainable. It should be faster. It should be equitable. It should not be lopsided. It should be balanced. Friends, if you take any of these aspects, any of these ideas, any of these areas, we are lacking. Is it sustainable? Our economic planning is sustainable. Our growth is sustainable. Sometimes we get a double digit. Sometimes we get very less. And fortunately, our growth rate is very comfortable in the recent past. And now it is expected that only Indian growth is very on the top as compared to other countries. Only China is very nearer to our growth rate. And faster, of course, it shows faster, but it is not as expected. Equitable and balanced. These two we have our own reservations due to various reasons. Due to demographic setting, geopolitical setting, social taboos, etc., our growth rate is not equitable and also balanced. And with these, we have almost completed 7 decades of Indian economic planning. And now we call India is a rich country with poor people. As 30% of Indian wealth was concentrated, global wealth was concentrated in India during 17th century, and it moved away due to various reasons. And now again, the curve is favoring towards us as per the World Knowledge Report 2014. As you all know, India is in the 3rd place in terms of aggregate wealth position, though the per capita wealth concentration is less in India. And surely, though it may take 2 or 3 decades, India will reach #1 stage in terms of wealth possession. And then Indian economic planning and the implementation, it has got its own historical perspective. As you all know, the Indian economic planning, starting from first 5-year plan till now, how various perspectives, various challenges, various achievements we have encountered across India. And then we also have policy paralysis, not necessarily within agriculture sector, and on priority sector. There is a huge difficulty, huge challenges in identifying priority sectors. For example, you take the 3rd 5-year plan onwards, we have been prioritizing to remove the poverty level. And we have come to the stage where we have the major development program, major welfare program of Mahatma Gandhi National Rural Employment Guarantee, which was enacted. And now this is the largest program, largest welfare program in the world. And most of the economists, the right-wing economists, call it as old wine and new bottle. Therefore, we find the planners, the bureaucrats, the administrators find it difficulty to prioritize their area so that the equitable, balanced development, the economic development can be taken up. And then parallel economy, on the one hand, our growth rate is very comfortable, our growth trajectory is appreciable, but at the same time, corruption, nepotism, everything is there. If you go to any revenue department, if you go to registration department, there the agents, the brokers have parallel economy, parallel administration, which is hindering our growth and development. Inaccurate estimates due to poor data set, poor data authenticity, and then the allocation of resources is also due to that. And all these led to totalitarianism in terms of allotment with a lot of political interest, political favor and disfavor, and ultimately it leads to authoritarianism, though we call it as, we call Indian development as mixed economy with the political setup. And we have success stories, very fantastic. We have Navaratnas, where the employment as well as income of at least some section of the people, those who work there, those who are employed there, could be increased, which will be having, which are having the spillover effect on the economy, general economy. Still, we have 1/3 of people below poverty line in India. And then our major economic ideas drawn from Gandhian philosophy of sustainable development, sustainable resource use, rural development, village development for permanent economic problem, for solving permanent economic problem has been left aside, though our Nehruvian model of economic growth gave good fillip to capital intensive large scale economy. Still, it has not percolated down to villages, and therefore there is a compartmentalized development in the Indian subcontinent. And the ideas of J.C. Kumarappa and the Gandhian philosophy has taken sidetrack. Now, of course, we started looking at them and started learning the sustainable economic development. We have not stopped there, and we have gone to agriculture sector by emphasizing the need for sustainable agriculture development and sustainable rural development. Now, the policy interventions, if you look at the Indian economic planning, we all know very well that the economy is not taking either left or right. We want to have center, what we call the mixed economy. So we call it as mixed economy, though our emphasis was through the government intervention in the initial stages, of late, particularly after the introduction of LPG, liberalization, privatization, globalization, what we call, the economists call it as market-based economic policies, the private sector started getting its own influence on the production, distribution, and other economic activities in the Indian subcontinent. If we take specifically within agriculture, we laid emphasis on green revolution in the initial stage. We wanted to increase the aggregate production so that our food starvation will be, famine can be avoided. And therefore, we did not give much emphasis on the efficiency level. We wanted to focus only on the aggregate production. And what we term it as production versus area-led growth. It was not the efficiency level was improved, and it is due to the larger area that has been brought under plow, our production could be achieved. That is what the mantra was in those days. And then we wanted to focus on fine cereals so that immediate need of food security can be ensured. Therefore, in the beginning, we focused more on science and technology, research and development in terms of developing cultivars in two major crops, as you all know, paddy and wheat, which resulted good yield, good production, especially in the food baskets of India and some parts of South India, including Tamil Nadu, Kerala, Karnataka, Andhra Pradesh, etc. And the coarse cereals got a backseat, and now we started giving emphasis on coarse cereals. Coarse cereals include ragi, bajra, jowar, etc., which are, we call it as minor millets. We also call it as nutri-millets. And resource-rich versus poor areas. Friends, if you see the focus on agricultural development, research, etc., in the initial stages, we wanted to introduce the packages in resource-endowed regions. I think in Karnataka, Mandya district was selected. In Tamil Nadu, Tanjavur was selected. Similarly, only the resource-endowed regions in many states, numbering 6 districts in the country, were picked up from these water-intensive, water source available areas, regions, and we very sarcastically we prevented the intervention on the resource-poor areas, what we call predominantly dryland agriculture system. And then the policy versus technological fatigue is also paramount. We have discussed, touched upon, and this concept got much attention during the leadership of Mr. Manmohan Singh. He only initiated the dialogue, the policy versus technological aspect. I mean, the technocrats, the scientists, the boffins are very indifferent in terms of new technology through research and development in their laboratories. And on the other hand, equally, the policy support to different aspects of agriculture was also concerned. as per the argument of Manmohan Singh. And therefore, ultimately, there is a fatigue in agricultural development as such. And sometimes, if you look at the data, even the production started stagnating in resource-endowed regions like Punjab, Haryana, in South Tamil Nadu as well. Even the Kaveri Delta in Tamil Nadu, there are stagnation in terms of production and productivity due to intensive agriculture with unscientific, unsustainable style of operating the fertile land. And then private versus public investment in agriculture. And if you look at the growth in investment, the public investment has been consistently declining, irrespective of states, whether it is BJP ruled states or other parties ruled states in India. And also the union government's relative allocation to agriculture sector has been consistently declining, though in terms of absolute, it is increasing. And on the other hand, the private investment in agriculture is primarily on the profitable crops, profitable enterprises like plantation crops, and also the what you call allied sectors, fisheries, livestock, forestries, etc., are on corporate style. Most of the MNCs, corporate bodies started investing in capital intensive and the factory type of farming system in India, which is coming up on large scale in the prosperous areas. And very surprisingly, one of the examples wherever we discuss the agriculture development agriculture scenario in India, we find the paradoxical situations in India where we sell the agriculture commodities, the nutritious commodities, on the very bad condition of roadsides. Whereas right opposite to such commodities, such markets, you find AC rooms where we sell chappals and shoes in the AC rooms. That is the condition we get. We don't have AC rooms for storing agricultural commodities, but we have AC rooms for storing chappals and footwears. This is the paradoxical situations you find in India. And also there are different opinions regarding the connectivity between food security and nutritional security. Though we could produce more than 330 million tons of food grains, still almost 12% of the Indian population goes to bed without proper food to their stomach. And the agrarian distress is mounting, not necessarily in the resource-starved areas like dryland regions, but also in agricultural prosperous areas. The distress is mounting because the input cost is increasing. The market price for agriculture commodities is slowly increasing, very slightly increasing, and therefore a mismatch between the input cost and output realized by the farmers in the agriculture sector. Therefore, the distress is mounting, and farmers are in distress, and ultimately the farmers end up their life by suicide. Friends, let me make a mention here. One of the related issues, when the farmer suicides were increasingly found during late 90s, immediately after the introduction of LPG, only Karnataka state constituted a committee under the chairmanship of Professor Veeresh, who was the Vice Chancellor of University of Agricultural Sciences. They brought out a report submitted to the government of Karnataka, which is Bible to other states and also the union government, which listed out various factors that led to the farmers committing suicide, including the resources inefficiency, gambling, alcohol consumptions, crop failures, and also diversion of funded to non-agricultural activities, etc., which is being debated at length, and also the remedial measures have been initiated, not only within including past. Such issues have been cropped up time and again. And then, due to distress, the farmers, in some places where they have the strong lobbying power, political backing, like sugar lobby in Maharashtra, grapes lobby in sugar Maharashtra, and then rice lobby in Andhra Pradesh, they declare crop holidays they will go to that extent. The distressness drives the farmers to declare crop holidays, and which is going to create a kind of unsustainable food grain availability in the Indian subcontinent, which is a threat to the food security. Employment is shrinking, despite the fact that the share of income from manufacturing sector is growing. What we call jobless growth in India. And as I insisted, as I commented in the beginning, Indian agriculture is showing, demonstrating, displaying, outperforming on some areas where we are first in terms of aggregate production. For instance, paddy, wheat, coffee, sugarcane. We are almost coming within fifth rank in terms of aggregate production in the world. But when it comes to the question of per unit productivity, paddy, wheat, coffee, sugarcane, they all get 2 digits rank, and sometimes it goes to 3 digits rank at the global level. It means we are utilizing the crucial resources, including water, energy, etc., unscientifically, and which needs to be addressed very seriously to ensure the efficiency level within agriculture. Of course, it's not only from the technological side or technocrats' role. It is a combination of initiatives from farmers, the development thinkers, policy makers, planners, and also the technocrats, the scientists, agriculture scientists, etc. Everyone puts their mind together so that the efficiency level of various domains within agriculture can be ensured. And pathetically, we have many millionaires in the world, but we also have large below poverty line households in the world. And then the economic growth was very impressive. And during up to 80s, and subsequently we had a crisis, and we went in for opening up our economy. And till then, the state was dominating. Now the private sector is dominating in the Indian economy. Inefficient public sector, balance of payment crisis, and the introduction of LPG during the early 90s. And we have introduced various rural development programs during third 5-year plan, and it was peak up to fifth 5-year plan. If you trace the literature, academic literature on the rural development, you get plenty of literature on rural development, and we could achieve very less in that domain. And now we have gone to the extent of ensuring the rural development through Act, Guaranteed Act, what we call NAREGA. And again, as I commented in the beginning, some of the right-wing thinkers call it as old wine in new bottle. It means even the NAREGA cannot fulfill the objective of eradicating poverty in India. That is what the inner meaning of old wine, new bottle. Other issues, as you all know, how the demonetization, introduction of GST, and the national monetization framework have all influenced the development and also the growth patterns in India. Now let us quickly browse it, the aspects of economic growth patterns in India. Friends, now the planning document, Niti Aayog document, very clearly depicts the fact that our growth should be balanced, equitable. Is it balanced? Now, the service sector is dominating the GDP as compared to manufacturing or industrial sector and agriculture sector, where still 45% of the people are engaged in agriculture. The industrial sector or manufacturing sector showed upward movement both in terms of employment as well as income generation. However, still it is not in a position to increase its share in the employment as per the CARE study in the year 2017. And the excellent performance of service sector. Again, here we have difficulty. We are not excelling in hardware sector. We are excelling in software sector. which is again a kind of jobless growth which we have been witnessing. And even the Silicon Valley, the employment in service sector is also shaking as per the recent reports. And most of the giants, the IT giants like Infosys, Wipro, Cognizant, they are going to they are going to kick out the labor through hire and fire technique. Now there is a paradoxical change in the composition of GDP as well. The agriculture offers its a share of 10 to 12% to total GDP, where 48% of its people are employed. And as per the government's own situational assessment survey published by the National uh, Census Organization, 42% of the farmers, whether they are middle farmer or large farmers, they want to abandon agriculture and settle down by migrating to urban areas. I remember when we were searching literature for writing a paper on drought in Karnataka, the way forward for economic and political weekly, we came to understand even the marginal farmers from northern part of Karnataka, what they call it as Hyderabad, Karnataka, most of them started migrating towards green patches like Bangalore, Mysore, Dharwad, Hubballi, where the prospects in construction sector is more and the wage is more. Therefore, large chunk of farmers, even large farmers, started migrating. Therefore, it is not surprising that the situational assessment survey estimated that 42% of the farmers wanted to leave agriculture and settle down in urban areas. Friends, there is a concept called crowding out effect from Indian economy, where Arthur Lewis theoretically argued that once the people migrate from rural areas to semi-urban areas, from semi-urban areas to urban areas, they will become unskilled from unskilled to semi-skilled and semi-skilled to skilled in the long run. That is what the hypothesis given by Arthur Lewis. But that is not happening in India. Whatever the amount of people are absorbed in urban areas, though it is small scale due to various social reasons, they are not migrating on a large scale to urban areas, and still they continue to plow their land in rural areas. And whoever is migrating, their condition is also very pathetic in urban areas because our urban planning is unable to meet their growing demand in terms of housing, other social sectors like education, health, etc. And therefore, the slums are growing in metropolitan cities like Bangalore, Ahmedabad, Mumbai, Chennai, Delhi, etc. And whoever is migrating, their living condition is very bad. That is what we could see in growth